can produce and consume and have preferences, over a higher period of time. But also there is kind of an opportunity, and probably there is, if you want, it's a must on the enterprises to adapt constantly products to serve this upcoming marketplace. So the numbers are quite telling. We've got 1 billion people over 60, and that figure is only going to double in the next years, literally by mid-century. And where the other billion is going to come from? Well, you guess, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East. So we've got emerging economies with another billion of over 60 plus in terms of marketplace. So that's just an animation showing you some of the places, but also trying to make a point here around that this is not different than any other of the market opportunities that ways better than me that we had in the past, right? In the 90s we were talking about Eastern Europe, we're talking about India coming up with 800 million consumer on the global scene. In 2000s we were talking about Latin America and the changes and the new opportunities of the Latin American markets, China joining the WTO. In 2010s we were talking about G20, millennials. Well, this is another important shift that we really have to figure out basically and deal with. But again, not in a negative way, but in an opportunistic way. And so done right, aging is just going to be a multiplier of global GDP, just like other megatrends, for instance, technology, urbanization, information explosion, and you name it. So what's happening is that politics are actually already noticing, this thing. Politicians are quite let's say, focused, and you can see a couple of events and a couple of milestones and hooks, that we are following particularly with particular interest, from the World Health Organization to the G20 to business meetings to UN meetings. And I don't know if any of you works in government, but this is a critical thing for countries too, because whoever is able to take the lead in developing the appropriate high level of infrastructure to support the demographic way, but also conceive and supply new and adapted product, is going to just lead the charge, is going to be basically as successful as those that were in the forefront of the technological communication revolution. It's an issue of geopolitics. Countries that are able to facilitate and reap the benefits of the silver economy will be ahead of the curve, right? Their export will rise, their soft power will rise. So this is a huge opportunity for countries. The numbers are clear. You probably know this better than me, so I'm going to be very quick. 7.6 trillion, roughly 40% of the US GDP is actually the silver economy. In Europe, we're talking about $4 trillion and 20% of the GDP, and this is just going to grow, because the silver economy is actually going to grow even more in proportion than the overall economy. Now, in the second part of this keynote, I just wanted to talk about a couple of trends. The first one is around consumers, right? We have significant transformational insights when it comes to consumer. There is a big mismatch between what we are currently actually we're dealing with in terms of consumer. So with this demographic segment, and also there is a mismatch about what kind of value this consumer could offer to society, from spending power, but also from productivity, from social contribution. In fact, one of the things that many people have observed is that many companies, especially from 2010, have been chasing the millennial dollar. Everybody, like as a mantra, let's go after these guys. But actually, what's happening is that companies need to be aware, and are increasingly becoming aware, of a transformation of their most profitable, most loyal, most valuable customer base. So those who are going to intercept that trend, of course, are going to be successful, and this happens through product adaptation, through increased advocacy, to increase investments, because these people are developing preference. So it's not anymore, offering products that they need, but also the products that they want. Another interesting trend within the mega trend is, some of the features of these new consumers. I'm just going to mention a little bit of that, of what you see here on screen. First of all, diversity. So the 60, 55 plus consumer group, it's actually not a monolith as we generally are basically bound to think, right? In fact, the needs of older generations are actually going to be, needs to be divided, like in different segments. What the 55 plus need is not what the 60 plus need, what the 70 plus need, what the 85 plus need. Actually, 85 plus is the highest growing demographic. So what do we do for these people from a product point of view? Another interesting feature here is that these consumers are increasingly healthy and active. So a growing percentage of older adults are actually, they see this health and being active as a need to fulfill. And, the investment is encouraged in this because they see that as a value. Tech savviness is another dimension. It's very relevant now. It's going to be incredibly relevant when the millennials of today are going to be 55, 60. So we're talking about 10 years, 15 years time. A lot of adults, older adults, participate in digital economy, in the way they shop, in the way they stay in touch with people, in the way they learn, they stay healthy. Again, this is another area for the private capital to look into. And then, of course, the information explosion, what everybody's talking about, this has really created new influences. It's orienting choice. For instance, what's happening in healthcare, adults will increasingly have more access to, to knowledge, to services, to solutions, and this is going to influence, again, awareness, choice, and so on. The other part of the trend, it's looking at age tech, right, as one of these kind of segments within the old silver economy. And many people, of course, are considering age tech as the next big thing, right? You read blogs, anything else. There is little doubt that the longevity market is a quite desperate need of innovation. And we see some movement. We're just talking earlier before. Some of the investors, venture capitalists, are actually starting to pick up on this trend because there is a potential and there is probably some unicorn laying out somewhere in the vertical. But what are the features of this age tech? So I just picked four. There probably will be even more. First of all, we're talking about market size, which is significant. We're talking about roughly in the longevity economy, which is the underlying sector to age tech, we're talking about 20 trillion in GDP per year. Now, if you think about financial services, which gave the rise to fintech, so we're talking about their 11 trillion. So as you can see, this is actually bigger than the underlying basis for fintech, and fintech, you know very well, has become very quickly a very interesting venture vertical. What's more is that some of those companies are starting, to abandon the gold rush to the millennial dollars and look into, the 55 plus. Because actually, when we look around in the age tech, we see companies we're very familiar with: Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Airbnb, and you name it. So more and more we're getting product adaptation and reconfiguration for older segments. Together with this, there is also another interesting trend, which is the rise of age-friendly cities. Thanks to international advocacy, what the World Health Organization is doing, what many businesses are doing in their sustainability strategies. And the recent trend is actually very favorable to age tech because this is the natural environment where the elderly seek for services, actually operate, if you want. And last but not least, there is a strong innovation collateral because the mindset is shifting, right? We're not looking anymore into age, older consumer, so kind of stiff type of technology, but we're talking about AI, robotics, cloud automation, wearables, all kind of new forefront technology that are actually being experimented, adapted, to this new segment. So in the conclusive part of that, just a provocation here on slide, right? Grabbing the market opportunity is a kind of clear, but we need need that to be accompanied to societal reform. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about commercial adaptation, new products. Once they reach a plateau, then we need, that level of advocacy, that level of societal engagement. And so, maybe we're talking about revisiting the social contract. We don't know. This is stuff that is happening as we speak. And, there is the need for businesses to grab that opportunity, to adapt the products, to, join that this trend. But also there is the need as well for society to catch up. And what's needed? Well, there are a few things, right? It's a matter of evolution. First of all, we have to combat ageism, which is still continuing devaluing older workers and even young people. At the end of the day, this is an issue, for everybody in this room. It's an issue for my kids, and it's an issue for their kids too. It's about all people, actually. So ageism is the very first thing that we need to look into. And, your community is probably one of the best placed for taking steps. But also governments need to think about a life course approach in their policies. Education, work, pension, health, finance, everything has to be coordinated together. People have to speak within governments in order to face what's happening out there. On the micro level, there is the need to foster autonomy and connectivity. We need to put the people in conditions to actually move, be flexible, have the meetings they want, meet the people they want, go wherever they want, so that they will continue to develop those preferences in order for businesses, private capital to kind of inject energy in that. So really concluding that talk is, we're probably on a verge of an epic transformation here. This is something, some of the transition we have to do, right? We have to go from retirement to longevity. We have to go from ageism to reimagined aging. We have to stop talking about incentives for the young people. It's very important, but actually it's all age incentives, because we're talking about 100-year life, like the media are starting to broadcast. This is a couple of examples of papers that were collected. So this is, of course, sensational, but it's not that far, because in the end of the day, this is about all people, and there is a huge opportunity to be grasped there. And I thank you very much for your attention this morning. Thank you.